For each fight on this weekend's upcoming card, including for the prelims, I'm going to be comparing stats, reviewing recent fighter history, analyzing the results of my 7 data science prediction models, and giving a combined weighted prediction based on those models. I'll also provide my final prediction combining both quantitative and qualitative information together. Later this week, I'll upload a video covering promising underdogs, best inexpensive favorites, and prop bets for y'all to consider, which I'll highlight some great opportunities for you guys. Hopefully you can use these predictions and data to confirm your picks, avoid mistakes, find value bets, or just informative and entertainment purposes to prepare for the lead up to this weekend's event. Please like and subscribe if you find this content interesting, informative, or helpful. It helps keep me motivated to create these videos for you all. I've also added my Patreon information in the description if you'd like to support the channel through that. There's a $10 a month contribution tier and a $20 a month premium tier, which will give you early access to all of the analysis and results for my videos, as well as additional data analysis and stats. So that includes my prediction model results, fighter history, stat overviews, promising underdogs, best inexpensive favorites, prop bets to consider, and a deep dive into each fighter's record history and an analysis through each of their individual historical fights. So you'll get all sorts of stats and data analysis which will help you with your picks and bets. And for $20 a month, which is around $5 per event, you can get all of that information. You can purchase event analysis separately, but the membership is cheaper and easier. Plus, you're directly helping improve and expand the content of this channel. Running this data and analysis, each of the prediction models, the fight simulations, and updating the site takes hours every day and week, so I'd greatly appreciate your support. And thank you all for the recent support that you have shown. It truly means the world to me that we can share our passion for MMA and continue to build this community together. The last thing that I want to mention is that there is a BetUS promotion in the description below. If you use that link, it's an affiliate link, so if you set up your account, you'll get a promotional offer with that. I'm excited to continue working on this analysis and content for you all. Thank you guys again for all of your support. Let's go ahead and dive right into the predictions. UFC 312 is this Saturday, and for the main event, we have Strickland versus Jenkins du Plessis, the rematch. These guys are running it back, and there's a lot of fire in this main event. For the co-main event, we have Zhang Weili versus Tatiana Suarez, a striker versus wrestler showdown. Honestly, a pretty good matchup, interesting as well. And then we also have some other fighters on this card that are really interesting. We have some heavyweights, we have rising contenders. This is going to be a really good event at Sydney, and I'm very excited to cover the whole thing head to toe with you guys right now, starting with Rongzhu versus Kody Steele. For that fight, I did end up picking Kody Steele. Now, the odds are giving Kody Steele a 68.06% probability of victory. Now, I couldn't run both of these guys through my prediction models, unfortunately. However, I ended up giving Kody Steele a 58% probability of victory. So I normalized the reading a little bit. I don't agree with the odds or as confident as the odds are, because you also never know with these kind of fights, but also based on the research I've done on Rongzhu. But I'll talk about all of that. First, let's talk about the statistical advantages that Kody Steele has. First of all, Kody Steele, he absorbs 0.53 less strikes per minute. He has a 16% higher striking defense, and he has a 15% higher takedown defense. Now, Kody Steele, if you take a look at his record, he has 7 wins, no losses. He's undefeated. Out of his 7 wins, let's break them down real quick. 4 of them were KO/TKOs, 1 was a submission victory, and 2 were decision victories, which gives him a 72% finish rate all in all. Now, he does have 1 first-round finish out of his 7 wins. Clearly, he's not a first-round finish kind of guy, but still, he's been on a tear, 7-fight win streak. Last time he won was back in October of 2024, so he's pretty active as well. Let's talk about the stylistic advantages that make me point towards Kody Steele and pick him as the winner in this matchup. The first thing that I really like about Kody is his elite grappling. He holds a BJJ black belt, and he's also competed in very high-level grappling events such as EBI Combat, Third Coast Grappling, blah, blah, blah. He's defeated pretty good opponents like DJ Jackson and Gregory Rodriguez. So I really like his submission and grappling expertise. I think that it feeds in very well in him trying to control fights and also control those scrambles or transitions. And I think that's actually somewhere where Rongzhu, he just hasn't faced someone with that level of expertise, and I think that's going to go against him in this dynamic matchup. Now, let's also talk about the training environment. Now, he trains, and I'm talking about Kody, he trains at Syndicate MMA, and that's over at Las Vegas. He's also training with veterans like Khalil Roundtree and Murad Valishvili, who you guys know, I mean, that's a champion right there. He's a great mentor, and if you want to learn from anyone, you want to learn from someone like Murad, because he's just very well-rounded. I mean, he's a machine, you know what I'm saying? So that kind of stuff, it kind of contrasts heavily with Rongzhu. Rongzhu, he's kind of on the regional Chinese scene with his gym background, but nothing too spectacular that I could speak to. Now, I also like Kody's mental composure under pressure. I mean, he's faced a lot of those grappling matches, like I said, and there's also like the ADCC trials or Polaris and stuff like that, where he's faced a lot of submission specialists, like you have Tyro Tolo and Dante Leon. Regardless, basically, he has a very calm approach. I like his mental composure. And that kind of feeds into my next point. I like his fight IQ and his overall adaptability. He's shown in those regional areas where he's kind of switched from striking to grappling mid-fight, he's done that very well. Like, for example, if you've seen or heard of his CFFC 89, his KO win, it came after recognizing a lot of the striking opportunities in his opponent, despite being a credentialed grappler for the most part. And so that kind of stuff where you can reset and exploit those openings when your initial plan kind of fails, that's the kind of key stuff that I want to see in a fighter that's just, you know, stepping foot into the UFC and just progressing in their professional fighting career. Now, I do like his experience, like I said, in those kind of high-stakes moments. I like that a lot. Rongzhu, he's kind of shown some vulnerability in his game, especially when it comes to the later rounds. Frankly, I don't really like Rongzhu's cardio, if I'm being honest with you guys. Now, another thing I like about Kody is his cage cutting and the pressure that he utilizes when he's fighting his opponents. And overall, I just think he has a bit of a psychological edge as well. I mean, Rongzhu, he's never really faced an opponent with Steele's submission skills and that kind of threat. So I think there's going to be some hesitation when it comes to the striking, just to make sure that, you know, he doesn't get taken down and stuff like that. Long story short, I'm going with Kody Steele. I think he gets the finish. I'm taking Kody Steele via KO/TKO, and that's the bottom line. For the next fight, we have HyunSung Park versus Nyamjargal Tumendemberel. What a name. I'm picking HyunSung Park, and no, it's not because he has a shorter name. I'm giving him a 71% probability victory here. Prediction models, they agreed, but they gave him a lighter reading of 60.9% probability victory. Let's talk the statistics. So the reason I like HyunSung Park, his advantages are that he lands 1.02 more strikes per minute. He has a 6% higher striking accuracy, an 8% higher striking defense, a 48% higher takedown defense, and he also lands 0.2 more submissions on average. Now, HyunSung Park's total record is 9 wins, no losses, and let's break down those 9 wins. 4 of those were KO/TKOs, 4 were submissions, and 1 was a decision victory, which gives the guy an 89% finishing rate. Now, he does have 4 first-round finishes out of his 9 wins, so about half the time he's finishing it within the first round. Now, recently, he's won all 5 of his last 5 fights. In fact, of course, he's on that 9-fight win streak, like I said, has not ever lost. His most recent win was back in December of 2023, so he hasn't been active in about a year, but still, he's done very, very well. Let's talk about the stylistic and non-statistical advantages that really point the needle towards HyunSung Park. First thing, his technical striking. He's very precise as a striker. He's a technical striker, and I think that's going to give him the edge in this particular matchup against Tumendemberel, because that guy is way more chaotic in his style. Whereas Park, he has that background in kickboxing, including that match against guys who went on to become champions, like that K1 champ. I think his name was Hirotaka Urabi. I don't know how to pronounce it, you guys, but take my word for it. He's faced some good guys. That guy was young, but, you know, he did really good, and he demonstrated some good refined striking technique in that fight. Now, he's also pretty composed under pressure. I mean, he's shown the ability to really remain calm and execute his game plan, even in some of those high pressure situations. And, you know, he had that road to UFC tournament. He did some good performances there, and he secured finishes in pretty much all of his fights, I believe. So he did well overall. He's also versatile as a fighter. He's good in striking and the grappling department. Like I said, he has a lot of finishes, but he does have submission victories as well. It's even 4 striking finishes and 4 submission finishes, and that well-rounded skill set is exactly what I look for when I'm taking a look at winners out of my picks for fights. He also has some good experience against some higher level competition too. Now, I know that both of these guys, I mean, they're relatively new to the UFC, but Park has faced a tougher competition overall, arguably. He had that victory over Shannon Ross in his UFC debut, and then also he had success in road to UFC, right? And so I just think he's a little bit more prepared for bigger fights with better guys. Now, I also like his defensive grappling, and I don't think a lot of people mention that. His defensive grappling is better than Tumendemberel's, and I think that that's going to help him keep the fight standing, where he's going to have that advantage with his technical striking. Also, Park, I like the guy's fight IQ. I think he has pretty decent fight IQ. He makes good decisions in the cage. He's had some strategic performances that I've really liked. His nickname is Peace of Mind, and so he's not only sharp, but he's also very calm, and he's a very calculated guy when it comes to fighting. Now, both of these guys, I mean, I respect both guys. They're promising prospects, but ultimately, I do think HyunSung Park takes the fight via decision. I think it's going to go to the judges, but I do see him getting the decision victory. For the next fight, we have Quillan Salkilld versus Anshul Jubli. Now, for this fight, I am leaning towards Quillan Salkilld. Now, unfortunately, this is another fight where I couldn't run both of these guys through my prediction models, but that doesn't stop me from doing my research. Now, the odds are giving Quillan an 81% probability victory. He's a heavy favorite here. And let me tell you why I'm also leaning towards him. I ended up giving him about an 82% probability victory, and I know that's not very different, but I'll explain why. Let's first talk about the statistical reasons here. Now, Quillan, he's 5 years younger than his opponent, Anshul here, or Anshul, I should say. He also has a reach advantage of 6 inches. He has a 9% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 1.34 less strikes per minute, lands 8.18 more takedowns on average. That's really high. He has a 22% higher takedown accuracy and a 37% higher takedown defense, and he lands 0.6 more submissions on average. He has a lot of statistical advantages here. I mean, look at all the green that you see on your screen on the left side towards Quillan, right? Now, let's zoom out. Let's take a look at the guy's record. 7 wins, only 1 loss. Let's talk about those wins. Out of those 7 wins, 2 of those were KO/TKO victories, 3 were submissions, and 2 were decision victories. Not only is that versatile, but that also gives him a 72% finish rate, which I really like. Now, his one single loss was a submission loss, so it is important to keep that in mind. Full disclosure, guys. Now, Quillan, he has 3 first-round finishes out of his 7 wins, so about half the time, he's getting it finished within that very first round, regardless of which way he does it. Recently, he's been on a tear. He's won 5 of his last 5 fights. He's, in fact, on that 7-fight win streak. He's just lost that 1 fight. His most recent win, just to recap, was back in September of 2024. His most recent loss was all the way back in February of 2021. Let's talk about the stylistic things that make Quillan a huge favorite for this fight, even in my opinion. First, it would be his combination striking. He puts together really good combinations, very effective combinations. He mixes in those punches and kicks very well. And that versatile striking approach, it's going to pose a problem for Jubli. Also, when it comes to those striking to grappling transitions, Salkilld, he really does well with using his striking combinations to then set up those takedowns. And that is one key thing I look at when I'm trying to judge if someone's versatile. I think that skill is going to make it difficult for Jubli to predict and defend against those attacks. The guy's versatile. I also like the guy's clinch work. Now, Jubli, he's shown some weaknesses whenever it comes to the clinch, and I don't like that. Salkilld, on the other hand, he seems very comfortable in the clinch. He's going to get the advantage there, and I think that whenever the fight gets in close quarters, that's where Salkilld is going to shine, especially when it comes to clinch work. Let's also talk about adaptability. Now, Salkilld, he's mentioned that his greatest strength is his ability to absorb information and learn quickly. That is a very, very important skill. That, you know who says stuff like that? Mighty Mouse. Those kind of guys that are analytical, that know how to adjust and adapt in fights, they learn well. That's going to be a key factor. Now, keep in mind, Quillan is only 25, so no, I'm not comparing him to a legend here, but I'm saying that that is a very important skill to say. We'll see if that plays out in the rest of his professional fighting career, but so far he's done really well with that. You know, he's adaptable, and I think that that's going to make him effective, especially mid-fight. He's going to be able to adjust to whatever Jubli tries to do. Now, I also like the guy's elbow strikes. I mean, he's pretty proficient when it comes to those elbow strikes, especially as the counter attack, and especially when he's pressured. So he puts together a really good offense, even when he's trying to be defensive, and that's going to be an effective tool as well. I like that a lot. He also has a complete skill set, all in all. He doesn't really have a lot of holes in his game that I've noticed so far. He's well-rounded, and that's going to be challenging for Jubli. Not to mention, of course, the guy has kind of a home country advantage. But all in all, just long story short, I'm thinking Salkilld gets the fight. I think he gets it via KO/TKO. I don't like what I see out of Jubli here, respectfully. So that's the bottom line prediction for this fight. For the next fight, we have Jonathan Micallef, however the hell you pronounce it, versus Kevin Jousset. Now, for this fight, I am picking Kevin here. Now, unfortunately, this is another fight where I couldn't run both of these guys through prediction models because of the debut here. However, the odds are giving Kevin a 68% probability victory. Now, I ended up picking Kevin as well. I ended up bumping that up just a slight bit. I gave Kevin a 71% probability of victory because I really like what I saw out of him, not just in the stats, but stylistically. But first, let's talk about the stats here. Kevin, he has a height advantage of 2 inches in this matchup. He lands 7.4 more strikes per minute. That's very important to keep in mind. He also has a 31% higher striking accuracy, a 32% higher striking defense, and a 50% higher takedown defense. That's huge advantages. Even though the colors are split here between green and red on both sides, there's still very massive key advantages that Kevin holds. Now, let's take a look at his record. 10 wins, only 3 losses. Let's break that down. Out of the 10 wins, 5 of those were KO/TKOs, 1 was a submission, and 4 were decision victories, which gives him a 60% finish rate. And it does give him some versatility, but what that mostly tells me is the guy knows how to control fights where he needs to and get the win with judges, and he also has the ability to finish as well. Let's break down his 3 losses. 2 of them were KO/TKOs, and 1 was a decision loss. Now, Kevin does have 4 first-round finishes out of his 10 wins, which means 40% of the time he's putting his opponents away, which I really like. Which means 60% of the time he is keeping control of the fight and he's able to get the decision victory. Recently, he's done well. He's won 4 of his last 5 fights, but he is coming off of a loss into this fight. I will acknowledge that. His most recent win was back in December of 2023, so it's been a year, and his most recent loss was in September of 2024, just a few months ago. Let's talk about the stylistic advantages that our friend Kevin holds here. First thing I would say, technical striking. He has a lot of technical acumen, if I'm being honest. His ability to pick his spots really well when it comes to fights, and he kind of, if I had to compare the two, I would say he has a better striking game to Micallef, if I'm being very honest. Now, Micallef, on the other hand, he's known for his grappling, whereas Kevin, he's not. Not only that, but Kevin also has an experience advantage here. He's fought in the UFC a few times already, and Micallef, on the other hand, like I said, he's making that debut. That experience against at just higher level opponents, people seriously underestimate that the guys in the UFC, I know sometimes it's hard to believe with the performances we see and just the defensive lapses or whatever, but the UFC does have high-level competition compared to other regional promotions and stuff like that. Needless to say, some of you guys already know that, yada, yada, yada. But Micallef, he just doesn't have that kind of experience. Kevin, what I like about his game, it's his leg kicks. I mean, he's a huge leg kicker. He leans on that a lot. And that kind of weapon, it's going to be effective against Micallef as well. Now, Micallef, he's going to be looking to kind of close the distance and look for those takedowns. That's just part of his game plan. But those leg kicks, it's going to give him some trouble doing that. Another thing I like about Kevin is his defensive grappling. Now, he's known more for his striking, but Kevin has shown a bit of an underrated ground game. And I think that that's going to help him neutralize Micallef's primary strength in that wrestling and grappling department. That's going to be important as well. Now, Kevin, he is one of those guys that I think also has a pretty decent fight IQ. He kind of, if he has any kind of physical limitations, he's able to compensate that limitation with his technical skills and his technical knowledge. And I think that in fights, he has pretty good fight decision-making skills and adaptability overall. I also like the pace that he's able to control throughout fights. I mean, he's just really good at keeping control of fights, like I said, and I think that will frustrate someone like Micallef, who's trying to come in, execute his game plan against someone who's a little bit more experienced and someone those tactics are just not going to work on him. Bottom line here, I am picking Kevin here. I think he's going to win. I think he's going to get the decision. I don't see him getting the finish against Micallef. I do see him getting the decision victory, and that is the verdict for this fight. For the next fight, we have a fight I am very excited for. These guys are up and coming. They have huge names, huge backgrounds, and they're going to be big names in the UFC. We have Colby Thicknesse. Don't let the name fool you. Take a look at his picture on your screen. He is not thick at all. And then we have Aleksandre Topuria. If that name sounds familiar, duh, it's because it's the champion. It's his brother. Aleksandre Topuria is brothers with Ilia Topuria. A lot of you probably know that by now. Some of you don't, and that's perfectly all right. I'm not judging you guys. Now, for this fight, I am picking Aleksandre Topuria, and genetics has a big role to play in that, but also just in general, the research I've done, it does support that as well. Well, first and foremost, I could not run both of these guys through my prediction model, sadly, just to have transparency. The odds are giving Topuria about a 78% probability victory. I actually bumped that up a little bit. I bumped it up to 80% based on everything I've seen on both ends and how I think that dynamic is going to play out. First, let's talk about, well, I would talk about stats, but as you can see, there's not a lot of statistical figures on both these guys. But let's talk about the physical advantage. So Colby, he takes that department. He's about 3 inches taller in height, and he also has about a 2-inch greater reach. I had to do a lot of research on Topuria's reach, and I don't know if I could have found a lot of reputable sources, but I give you guys a pretty decent estimate there. I think that Colby has a little bit better of a reach in general. But regardless, I don't think the physical advantage is important here. Clearly, the Topuria bloodline knows what they're doing, even though they're relatively short. Don't tell them I said that. Let's talk about the stylistic advantages. Well, first, before we do that, let's talk about records here. So, Topuria, he has had 5 wins and 1 loss so far in his professional fighting career. Let's break that down real quick. Out of his 5 wins, 3 of those were KO/TKO, surprise, surprise, and 2 were submissions, which is interesting. The guy has a 100% finish rate regardless, and he's kind of versatile, and I like that. His 1 single loss was a KO/TKO loss. It's important to keep that in mind. Now, he does have 5 first-round finishes, so all 5 of his wins were all within the first round. This guy, he's deadly with those hands. Recently, he's won 4 of his last 5 fights, so he's had some good momentum overall. In fact, he's on 3-fight win streak coming into this fight. His most recent win, though, was back in May of 2023, so it's been a while, or a little over a year and a half, and his most recent loss was in May of 2015, so it's been well over, 9.5 years, give or take, since that loss. Finally, let's talk about the stylistic advantages that Topuria has. First of all, like I said, there's the family name, Topuria, and just the genetic benefits that come with that. Topuria is strong. He has strong hands. His brother clearly has a bit of that as well, and I think that's important to keep in mind. Also, when it comes to the training environment, you best believe that that's going to be very similar as well, and it's going to have a similar impact on his performance. If it works for his brother, odds are it's going to do good for him as well. I'm not gonna say he's future champ, but you get what I'm saying. Especially when you consider the fact that he does train with Ilya, so keep that in mind. Ilya is the UFC featherweight champion, for those of you who may not know. So the guy has good training partners. That's all I'm trying to say. He clearly has finishing ability as well. He's proven it. A lot of his wins have came via knockout. He's very aggressive in his fighting style. He has a very pressure-heavy fighting style. I think ultimately Colby's going to be a little bit overwhelmed. Again, there's not a lot of information on these guys to where I can make a very clear-cut analysis, but I'm trying to give you guys everything that I found. All in all, I do expect Aleksandre Topuria to win here. I really am putting a lot of emphasis on his training, the guys he's training with, obviously one of them being his brother, Champ, and that stuff, along with his aggression, along with some of his versatility that I've seen, his unpredictability as a fighter, all of that together, I think he can defeat Colby here, and I think he's going to actually get a TKO/KO, and it should be a fun fight. For the next fight, we have an interesting fight, and interesting in the sense that I don't actually expect this fight to go to a decision, and I know a lot of women's MMA fights do end up going to a decision, but I actually think this one's going to be a little bit different. Let's talk about it. For this fight, it is Wang Cong versus Bruna Brasil. For this fight, I am going with Wang Cong here. I'm giving her a 79% probability victory. Prediction models generally agree. They give him a 78% probability victory with the weighted average. Now, statistical reasons why I am picking Wang Cong: she has a height advantage of an inch here. She lands 2.87 more strikes per minute, which is important. While landing more volume, she also absorbs 1.86 less strikes per minute, which I like as well. She has a 20% higher striking defense, which it proves, and she has a 41% higher takedown defense. Her total record: 6 wins and only 1 loss. Out of her 6 wins, 2 were KO/TKOs, 2 were submissions, and 2 were decision victories. Perfectly even all throughout those categories, giving her a 67% finishing rate. Her only loss was a submission loss. She does have 3 first-round finishes out of her 6 wins, so half the time she is able to put her opponents away, which is impressive, especially in women's MMA. Now, recently she's done well. She's won 4 of her last 5 fights, but most recently she did come off of a loss, so keep that in mind. Her most recent win was back in August of 2024, and then she fought a few months later in November of 2024, and she lost that fight. Let's talk about the benefits and the stylistic advantages that Wang Cong has in this matchup. The first thing would be her striking style. Now, she is a Sanda/kickboxer, and I'll tell you what that is. So those Sanda techniques that I'm talking about, that is Chinese kickboxing. It includes sweeps and throws. She incorporates that with her MMA striking, and she even had that head kick TKO back in 2023, which was amazing against Tay. You guys definitely should check that out. Now, that unorthodox style that she has, it does definitely contrast with Brazil's conventional Muay Thai and boxing base. And what that essentially means, if I'm speaking a completely different language for some of you guys, it just means that it's unpredictable. You're creating a lot more unpredictable angles and combinations, and that benefit goes to Wang Cong. Now, she also, like I said, she's an elite level kickboxer. She had a 2015 decision win over Valentina Shevchenko in kickboxing, and I think that's important to note because Valentina Shevchenko is one of the best women's MMA fighters to ever do it. I'm not saying she's the best, so let's not start a whole debate, but she's really, really good. Now, she does have experience against world-class strikers, like I said, and I think that her ring craft and her adaptability in those striking exchanges, compared to Brazil at least, who completely lacks comparable high-level striking credentials compared to Wang Cong. I'm not saying Bruna Brazil is terrible, but I just don't think she's at that level. That's all I'm trying to say. Now, Wang Cong, she kind of has this pressure-first mentality, and I'll tell you what I mean. She aggressively closes the distance with her volume striking. Remember when I pointed out that volume stat? While also that defensive stat when it comes to her striking. Well, this is what I'm talking about. We saw that in her UFC debut against Victoria. That was really good. And I think that skill is going to disrupt Brazil's performance, because Brazil, what she likes to do is keep this methodical range management. She really likes to keep that range, and that it fails against some pressure-heavy opponents. Like when she faced Denise, for example, that it just didn't work out very well. Now, another thing I'll mention, along with those Sanda techniques that Wang Cong has, she does really good with the clinch as well. I mean, she has experience in throws from the clinch. Take a look at her 2022 submission over Ji Hong Feng after a takedown. That was insane. Now, that kind of stuff, it counters Brazil's clinch-heavy approach, because what it does is it offers offensive grappling options that are just beyond the regular schmegular MMA wrestling style. Now, another thing that I like about Wang Cong is her stance flexibility. She's a natural southpaw, but what she likes to do, she switches to orthodox a lot, especially when she's trying to attack the legs and the body. And that was noted, I believe, in her fight against Gabriela Fernandez, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Brazil, she has some defensive liabilities against those stance switchers, and that really just amplifies Wang Cong's skill set and her advantage in this fight, at least in my opinion. Another thing I really like is her defensive movement whenever it comes to exchanges. Now, we saw that number on paper with her stats, but let me kind of translate that into what I see in her style. We've already discussed that she employs that Sanda-influenced lateral style movement to evade some of those counters. We saw that even in her 2024 win, right? But that stuff contrasts with Brazil's tendency to retreat linearly, especially when she's under fire. That leaves her vulnerable to follow-up strikes. That is where Wang Cong is going to shine. All things considered, I think Wang Cong is going to win this fight. And not only do I think she's going to win, I think she's going to win via KO/TKO. I think this fight is kind of slept on. It's going to be a fun fight, if I'm being honest with you guys. At least for people who really appreciate martial arts and technical skill sets. I mean, some people, it's either let me see a knockout or I'm bored as hell whenever it comes to UFC fights. Hey, I respect you guys. Everyone likes to see a good knockout. My point is, this is going to be a technical warfare fight. I'm going to enjoy this fight thoroughly just because of the technique here. For the next fight, we have Nolan versus Viacheslav Borshchev. For this fight, I am picking Viacheslav Borshchev, and not because he has an Eastern European style name and it sounds tough. The reason I'm picking him is because I'm giving him a 60.8% probability victory. I really like what I see out of him. Prediction models disagree, man. They're giving him a 48.6% probability of victory. To be fair, that's 49%, very close to that 50% mark. It could lean either way. It just means that this is a very close matchup, at least on paper, based on those machine learning data science prediction models. 7 of them, by the way, they did that weighted average. Very close. Regardless, I am leaning towards Borshchev here. I'm giving him a 60%. That's decently confident. Let's talk about why. First, statistically, the reason I like Viacheslav here and the advantages he has statistically, he has a 3% higher striking accuracy while also absorbing 0.37 less strikes per minute, and he has a 10% higher striking defense. I like all of those stats paired together. Now, his total record, 8 wins, 4 losses. Out of his 8 wins, 6 of them were KO/TKOs and 2 were decision victories, which gives him a 75% finish rate, no submission victories. Out of his 4 losses, none of those were KO/TKO losses. 1 was a submission loss, and the remaining 3 were decision losses. He does have 3 first-round finishes out of his 8 wins, so almost half the time he's able to put his opponent's weight in that first round. Now, recently, out of his last 5 fights, he hasn't done the best. He's only won 2 of those last 5 fights, but he has won his most recent fight stepping into this fight. His most recent one was back in August of 2024, which snapped his losses, and his most recent loss was back in May of 2024, just a few months before that. So let's talk about his stylistic advantages here. First and foremost, he has really good striking experience. I mean, he has a deep background in kickboxing. He has a ton of amateur fights. I mean, I think I read he has like 200 amateur fights and a lot of kickboxing fights as well. I think 10% of those were kickboxing fights. And that kind of experience, it's going to give him a technical edge. I mean, he has great experience with that. Now, he's also a pretty crafty kickboxer, if I'm being honest. He's known for really good counters and just being crafty overall as a kickboxer. He reads his opponents really well, and he times his strikes very effectively. That kind of stuff, I think, is going to pose a problem for Nolan. I like to see that in someone's style. He's also adaptable whenever it comes to striking exchanges. Now, not only is he a kickboxer, but he's shown his ability to adjust his striking approach in the middle of fights. For example, in his fight against James Lontow, he was able to kind of find his timing and just land that effective offense when, even though he was like a little bit uncomfortable at first. Like, he was trying to find his rhythm, but he didn't immediately land his strikes very cleanly. And Lontow, he had that head movement, and his footwork definitely made it harder for Borshchev to land some of those punches. But still, he was able to adapt in that fight and then start landing stuff and finding the path to victory there. So he was able to do that really well. And he also, one thing I want to note is that he does train with Team Alpha Male. And in case you guys don't know, Team Alpha Male, they have produced a lot of champions throughout the years and throughout the decades, actually now. Wow, I've been watching UFC for a minute, but Team Alpha Male is pretty decent. I mean, they have some good coaches there, some strategic coaches as well. And so that experience should help him out as well. Just another advantage that I think that should go in his court. I also like him as a counter striker. He does have good counter striking skills, and again, that has to do a lot with his kickboxing background. So to cut a long story short, really, I think Borshchev's going to win here. I think he's going to get the KO/TKO. I don't see it going to the judges, so KO/TKO is the final verdict for this fight in favor of Borshchev. For the next fight, we have a fight that a lot of people are excited for with 2 young guys that are up and coming, and they're fun fighters. They're fun to watch. We have Jack Jenkins versus Gabriel Santos. Now, for this fight, I am picking Jack Jenkins, and it's not because of his mullet and mustache combination. I'm giving Jack a 54% probability victory. Prediction models had a little more faith in him. They gave him a 59% probability victory. I had to dock it a little bit based on what I've seen. I'll talk about it. First, let's talk about stylistic advantages that Jack has. He lands 0.14 more strikes per minute. He has a 1% better striking accuracy. He absorbs 1.85 less strikes per minute, which is better than the first 2 strikes. I mean, those were pretty much close. He also has a 14% higher striking defense, which is important, and he has a 17% higher takedown accuracy. Let's take a look at the guy's record. 13 wins, 3 losses. Out of those 13 wins, 6 of them were KO/TKOs, 3 were submissions, and 4 were decision victories, which gives him a 69% finish rate. Out of his 3 losses, 1 was a KO/TKO, and the remaining 2 were submission losses. Now, he does have 3 first-round finishes out of his 13 wins. Clearly, he is not a first-round finisher. Keep that in mind. Recently, he's won 4 of his last 5 fights, and he is coming off of a win into this fight. His most recent win was back in August of 2024. His most recent loss was in September of 2023, so it's been a while since he's faced a loss. But let's talk about his stylistic advantages here that make me point the needle ever so slightly in Jack's favor for this fight. So the first thing I really like about Jack that I want to mention with you guys is his strong boxing fundamentals. He's known for his clean offensive striking and those really good fundamentals. It works for him a lot, and that's going to give him an edge whenever it comes to exchanges, especially in the pocket. You know who he reminds me of just a little bit? Dustin the Diamond Poirier whenever it comes to the pocket. Boxers, I mean, that's not where you want to be with a boxer. That's all I'll say. Now, he's also at a home crowd. He's an Australian fighter, and this is a Sydney fight last time I checked. And so he will have the local crowd absolutely crazy for him. In fact, already on social media, people are going crazy over the guy. And that's because he's really good. And so that's just going to give him a bit of a psychological edge. Not to put too much emphasis on that, but still an advantage nonetheless. Now, going back to his style, he's a durable fighter. He's shown some good durability in his fights. That's going to allow him to withstand Santos's aggressive style and also just take over in those later rounds. Like I said, he's not a first-round finisher type of guy, but if he can figure you out and kind of it kind of just frustrates you in the sense that if he's facing someone who's aggressive and their aggressive tactics are not working, then that's going to allow him to take over, especially in the later rounds, like I said. Now, I also like his experience against some of those higher level guys. Now, Santos, he has faced some good opponents, but Jenkins, I like his UFC experience. I think he has just more experience in general, and that's going to be valuable for him as well. Now, one thing I like about his game is his leg kicks. He's used leg kicks very well in his previous fights. I think against that fight with what was it, Rod Costa, he did a lot of damage to Costa's legs with those kicks throughout that fight. It was insane. He's also an adaptable fighter overall. I mean, he's shown his ability to adapt his game plan mid-fight. A lot of my picks, it circles around that, because what that tells me is you're able to adjust. And if you need to adjust in any sport, not football, not basketball, not whatever, if you need to adjust in any sport, it's going to be in MMA. Why? Because you're talking about mixed martial arts. There's different paths to victories. There's different strengths and weaknesses. You got to be able to adapt. Bottom line there. I also like Jack's cardio and pace, just to reel it back and not deviate. Jack, he's known for his high-paced fighting style. And you know what? He does put up a relentless pace. I'll tell you that. He might not be able to finish guys in the first round frequently, but dang, he does put up a really good pace. All in all, I'm going for Jack here. I think Jack's going to get it done via decision, just based on his game plan and both of these guys' dynamics. I don't see him getting a finish, but still, Jack via decision, that's the way to go. For the next fight, we are cooking. We have Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado, a good fight. For this fight, I am leaning toward Jake Matthews. I'm giving him a 72% probability victory here. Now, the prediction models, they really liked him. They gave him a 75% probability victory. Now, the statistical reason why I'm picking him is because Jake Matthews here, he has a height advantage of 1 inch, but he has a reach advantage of 4 inches, and that's important. Now, with that, he also has a 3% better striking accuracy than Prado here, and he absorbs 3.12 less strikes per minute as well, with a 9% higher striking defense. Real quick, all of those paired together, that's really, really good for statistical advantages. Now, he does have a 39% higher takedown defense as well, while landing 0.2 more submissions on average than Prado does. Now, Jake, if you take a look at his record, 20 wins, 7 losses, a lot of experience. Out of his 20 wins, 5 of them were KO/TKOs, 8 were submissions, and 7 were decision victories, which gives him that sweet spot of a 65% finish rate. Now, let's break down his 7 losses here. 1 of those was a KO/TKO loss, 3 of those were submission losses, and 3 were decision losses. He does have 4 first-round finishes out of his 20 wins. He's not much of a first-round finisher. Recently, though, he's done well overall. He's won 3 of his last 5 fights, and he's coming off of a win into this fight. His most recent win was midway through last year in June, and his most recent loss was in November of 2023, so it's been a little over a year. Let's talk about his advantages and his stylistic advantages. First thing I would say is, like I said, experience. His experience at middleweight specifically. He's been competing at that 170-pound mark for years, whereas on the other side, we have Prado, who's moving up from that lightweight weight. And so that's going to give Matthews a bit of an edge overall in adjusting to the power and speed of when it comes to that with welterweight fighters. Whereas Prado, you know, he has still a bit of ways to go in that department. I also like Matthews when it comes to his defensive skills. He's really improved when it comes to the striking and wrestling defense, especially over the span of his career. He's been able to avoid a lot of damage and neutralize his opponent's offense more effectively than Prado, I would say. He's also a composed fighter overall. I mean, he's had 20 fights, like I said. He knows how to remain calm, and he's fine with pressure. It doesn't really get to him. Now, Prado, he's shown a little bit of a tendency for some aggression that does lead to mistakes. It's not effective aggression sometimes, and that's dangerous. He's also a versatile wrestler overall. I mean, he's developed a pretty good wrestling game, and that just gives him some more options when it comes to a fight. He can kind of mix in those takedowns and some of those grappling exchanges to just keep Prado guessing and keep the control that he has going on. Now, I do like his fight IQ overall as well. I mean, he has really good UFC experience, like I said, but he's also shown the ability to make some key tactical adjustments when it comes to fights, and that kind of adaptability is what I like to see, and I think it's going to go well against a guy like Prado, who's just a little bit more aggressive and not as tactical. And again, this is one of those guys that has a bit of a hometown advantage. That is his home country, and so he will have that support as well. That might put a little bit of a psychological pressure on Prado. But back to the facts. cardio and pacing. Matthews, he's demonstrated ability to maintain a very steady pace over the span of 3 rounds. He's done this time and time again, whereas Prado, he's kind of slowed down whenever it comes to those mid to later rounds, especially if he's not able to get that early finish that he sometimes just relies on. I don't like that. All in all, I'm taking Jake Matthews here. I think he gets it done via decision. I don't think there's going to be a finish. Jake Matthews via decision is the verdict. For the next fight, we have Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato. Now, for this fight, I am picking Rodolfo here. I'm giving him a 68.6% probability of victory. The prediction models, they gave him a little bit less of a reading. They gave him a 66.6% probability of victory. Now, the statistical things that I like about Rodolfo, he has a height advantage of 1 inch in this matchup, but he has a reach advantage of 3 inches, which is also important. Now, with that, he also lands 2.8 more strikes per minute than his opponent does, and he has a 7% higher striking accuracy as well. I like all of that paired together. He also has a 40% higher takedown defense. Now, Rodolfo, if you take a look at his record, 12 wins, 2 losses. Out of his 12 wins, 7 of those were KO/TKOs, 4 were submissions, and he only has had 1 decision victory, which gives him a very high 92% finish rate. Out of his 2 losses, both of those were KO/TKO losses. He does have 8 first-round finishes out of his 12 wins. So what is that? 75% of the time, the guy is putting away his opponents within the very first round. Not only that, but let's talk about his momentum. He's recently won 4 of his last 5 fights, and he's currently on a 4-fight win streak. Now let's talk about his stylistic advantages. Real quick though, sorry I hopped over this. His most recent win, in case you guys were wondering, was back in December of 2023. His most recent loss was back in September of 2022. So he's not the most active guy, but his loss, it's been a while since he's had his last loss. So let's talk about those stylistic advantages. First thing I would say, his momentum. I highlighted that a little bit earlier, but he's riding that 4-fight win streak. He had that impressive UFC debut, and you might be thinking, hey, a 4-fight win streak, no big deal, right? But let's take a look at Crute. He has not won a fight in over 4 years, guys. Keep that in mind, please, when you're trying to make a pick for this fight. What can you say about a guy like that? He has not won a fight in over 4 years. Why this guy is on a pay-per-view, why we're paying to see him, those are questions beyond me. Those are questions that you got to take up with Uncle Dana. But the point is, Crute is not a brute. That guy has not won in over 4 years, guys. And I just want to speak to the momentum in favor of Bellato, but also just the psychological impact that has. Let's continue on the path of talking about stylistic advantages. Striking versatility. Bellato, he has a lot of diverse striking in his game, especially when you talk about that lead hand that he has. He's unpredictable, and that's gonna pose problems for a guy like Crute, because Crute is not the best defensive guy. He's been susceptible, especially in some of his recent fights. He's just not very defensively sound, and when you have a guy like Bellato who uses that lead hand very, very well, that is dangerous, guys. Now, another thing I like, Bellato, he's just one of those fighters that is very resilient, and he has good heart. He's lion-hearted. He survives some really bad situations in fights. He does well. He overcomes that adversity, and he gets that win, and that's what I like to see. I mean, that's really good in a fighter, just having that grit, right? He also has good grappling. I mean, Crute, I'll say Crute is known for his grappling and his experience in grappling, but Bellato is a jiu-jitsu guy. He has a background in jiu-jitsu. He's been an active competitor with multiple titles, including international ones, Pan American, Brazilian state championships, you name it. He's a very high-level grappler overall, and that's going to neutralize some of Crute's advantages, or at least perceived advantages by the public. I don't even know why the odds are this close with this fight, if I'm being quite honest with you guys. I'll continue. Other things that I want to mention, he has a very high finishing ability. We saw that in the stats, but also just stylistically. He has this killer instinct, and that's going to be dangerous for Crute. I mean, this guy, as soon as he steps in, he's going to be reading Crute as soon as the fight starts. I mean, he's looking for the opportunity, hopefully within the first round. He's looking to get it done. He's also an adaptable fighter. I mean, he had some Contender Series appearances and that UFC debut. In all of those, I just see that this guy knows how to adjust his game plan. I like that. He has this tactical flexibility that I like to see, especially when you consider Crute is kind of a veteran and he hasn't done very well in the last few years. Bottom line, Bellato via KO/TKO. I think that is the logical, obvious way to go. Let me know if you guys disagree, but I think that that's where I'm leaning towards in this fight. I'm pretty confident on that. For the next fight, we push forward. We have Justin Tafa versus Thaleson Teixeira. For this fight, I am picking Thaleson here. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't run these guys through the prediction models, but the odds are giving Thaleson a 58% probability victory. I ended up bumping that up just a little bit to 61%. Let's talk about the stylistic advantages here, which you could see on your screen. There's a lot. This guy is 7 inches taller than Justin Tafa. I was going to say higher. He's 7 inches taller than Justin Tafa. He's 6 years younger. He has a reach advantage of 9 inches. These are very important physical advantages, guys. Now, with that, he lands 10.78 more strikes per minute. You're wondering why that's a huge physical advantage? Well, he uses it well in his game plan. 11 more strikes per minute with an 11% higher striking defense as well. Tougher to hit, and he hits a lot more. That's a lot of trouble for Tafa. Now, Teixeira, his total record, 7 wins, no losses. The guy's undefeated. 6 of his wins were KO/TKOs, and 1 was a submission win. What does that give him? A 100% finish rate. That's insane. He has 7 first-round finishes on top of that. So all of those finishes that I just mentioned to you guys, they all came within the very first round. He's been on a tear, guys. Now, his most recent win was back in September of 2024, so he's been pretty active. Let's talk about his stylistic advantages here. He's an aggressive fighter. I mean, he has a lot of aggression in his game. He presses forward, which I like to see, and he uses his physical advantages well whenever it comes to that. He's averaged a lot of significant strikes in his game, and when you have an advantage of like 9 inches in your reach, what can you say? I mean, I think that that's pretty automatic, right? And if you're not taking advantage of your physical advantage there, you're just not doing it right. So not only do I like his aggression, but he has a lot of power and finishing ability. I mean, a lot of his finishes, in fact, came within the very first round. I think that that's going to be a huge advantage, not only psychologically, but just stylistically. What can I say? I'm just going to cut to the chase. I'm thinking Thaleson gets a KO/TKO within the very first round. He has a lot of different strikes that he uses. I mean, he uses different angles, and he has a lot of variety of strikes. He's unpredictable. He's young. Keep in mind, this guy's only 25 years old. He has a lot of room to improve, whereas we're looking at Justin Tafa, who's 31, and he hasn't done really well, if I'm being honest, especially recently. Again, Teixeira, he's carrying a lot of momentum with him as well. Bottom line, Teixeira via KO/TKO. Long story short, this should be a pretty explosive fight, and I am expecting probably a first round KO/TKO. For the next fight, we have Zhang Weili, the champion, versus Tatiana Suarez. This is our co-main event of the evening. For this fight, I am picking Zhang Weili. I'm giving her a 51% probability of victory. Very, very close. Now, the prediction models, they were tricky. They gave her a 49% probability victory. So this is a very 50-50 fight. Not only do the machine learning, data science models agree, but I also think it's a very close fight, and I'll talk about why. First, let's talk about the statistic advantages that are pointing in Zhang Weili's favor. She lands 1.4 more strikes per minute. She has a 2% higher striking defense as well. Her total record, 25 wins and only 3 losses, and those 3 losses were against very high-level competition. Out of her 25 wins, 11 of those were KO/TKOs, 8 were submissions, and 6 were decision victories. She's very well-rounded and very versatile. She has a 76% finish rate despite all of that. Out of her 3 losses, one of those was a KO/TKO, and the other 2 were decision losses. She has 11 first-round finishes out of her 25 wins, so it's a little bit less than half, just shy, maybe at that 40-45% mark, but still, she does pretty good in that first round, or she has historically. Recently, she's done well. She's won 4 of her last 5 fights. In fact, she's on a 4-fight win streak, absolutely killing it. Her most recent win was April of 2024, and her most recent loss was all the way back in November of 2021. Now I want to talk about the stylistic advantages that I see in Zhang Weili, which make me point towards her in my pick in this fight. But again, at a very narrow level. So keep that in mind while I talk about her advantages. So first, her striking versatility. Zhang, she has a diverse striking arsenal, if I'm being honest. She includes powerful kicks and punches from different angles. Pretty tough to fight someone like that. And that's evident in that fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Rewatch that fight just for the technique and understanding Zhang Weili's striking game plan. She utilized a mix of techniques, and she really outpointed her, and it was a fun fight, at least for someone who likes the technical standpoint of fights. Now, she's also a pretty explosive fighter. She has some pretty good twitch muscles. She has power. She's able to generate some sudden burst of power and aggression in her strikes, and that definitely puts the hurt onto her opponents. She's had some knockout victories, like that one against Jessica Andrade was very interesting, where she finished the fight with like this flurry of strikes. It was pretty interesting to watch. She's also good in the clinch. Now, Suarez, she's known for her wrestling, but Zhang has shown some proficiency whenever it comes to the clinch. And not only does she use it offensively, but I've seen her use it defensively as well, which I really like. She's improved her clinch game, and that's been on display in her recent fights, and that's allowed her to control some key positions. Not only that, but defend some takedowns a little bit more effectively, and I like to see that. Now, she's also an adaptable fighter, if I'm being honest. She adjusts her strategy mid-fight, like that fight we saw against Yan Xiaonan, and she changed her tactics a little bit just to secure that victory after facing a little bit of a challenge early on in that fight. So that was a fun fight to watch as well. It's been interesting to watch her for the last few years fight in the UFC. Now keep in mind, Zhang Weili, she has championship level experience. She's been in multiple 5-round title fights. She's developed this mental fortitude of sorts whenever it comes to just having the correct pace that's required for championship level fights. That experience is definitely an advantage against someone like Suarez, who hasn't really competed in a 5-round style fight. And so I say all that to say Zhang Weili is more experienced, and she has good experience whenever it comes to the championship realm. And now, not only that, but if you listen to Zhang Weili's philosophy in fighting and her training, she's one of those fighters that takes improvements and learning from losses very, very seriously. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or what, but she definitely takes learning very seriously. She takes her losses very harshly. She focuses on continuously improving in not just one aspect, but all aspects of her game, like wrestling, grappling. So that kind of mindset, I love to see that in people in general. But when you have a fighter that has that mindset, it's going to help them neutralize some of their opponent's strengths. So I think that she will be able to neutralize some of Suarez's primary strengths. Not only that, but what I like in Zhang's style is she's a pressure fighter. I mean, sometimes she really pushes the pace. She applies constant pressure in fights, and that might just disrupt some of Suarez's wrestling heavy game plans that I do expect her to come into this fight with. And another place that I saw that for Zhang was in that fight against Jacek and the fight against Andrade. Now, those advantages, along with those technical skills that Zhang has that we've seen and her experience, I think that that's going to point the logic towards her in this breakdown. I know some people might disagree with me. Some people are leaning towards Tatiana. This is a very, very close fight, not only in the odds, not only in my 7 data science prediction models that are constantly learning and adapting with data and doing a lot of machine learning and algorithmic learning to come to conclusions. Not only all that, but also just my breakdown of both of these gals. It's going to be a very tough fight. All in all, I do see this going to the decision. I think it's going to be an absolute war between these two, with some dull moments, but a lot of interesting technical moments. It's just a matter of who can adapt, and I think Zhang Weili is going to be a little bit better at that. I'm going to take Zhang Weili via decision. Let me know what you guys think, because this is a very interesting and close fight. For the next fight, we have the current champ, Dricus du Plessis, versus Sean, the controversial Strickland. For this fight, guys, I am picking Dricus du Plessis. Don't hate me immediately. Sean's a great fighter, but I'm going to pick Dricus here, and I'll tell you why. I ended up giving him a 65% probability of victory here. Prediction models, they give him a little bit less. They give him a 60% probability of victory. But from what I've seen with Dricus, I think that he's at a pretty decent level, if I'm being honest with you guys. Let's talk statistics first. The things that are going in Dricus's advantage here: he's 2 years younger than Sean. He lands 0.17 more strikes per minute. That's not very much, but he has a 7% accuracy, which I do like, and I think that's crucial. Now, to play devil's advocate there, Sean does throw a lot of volume, so maybe you could make an argument there. Now, Dricus does land 2.26 more takedowns on average, which is key, and he also lands 0.7 more submissions on average. Let's take a look at Dricus's total record. 22 wins and only 2 losses. Out of his 22 wins, 9 of them were KO/TKOs, 11 were submissions, and only 2 have gone the decision, which gives the guy a very high 91% finishing rate. Sometimes he doesn't look like he's a finisher in his fighting style. He looks like someone that can draw it out to the judges, but he doesn't do that. He finishes a lot of his fights. Out of his 2 losses, 1 was a KO/TKO loss and 1 was a submission loss. Now, he does have 8 first-round finishes out of his 22 wins. He doesn't really deploy that first-round finish or that first-round aggression. He's a little bit more tactical. and he reads his opponents really well. But 8 first-round finishes out of 22 wins. Recently, he's been on a tear. Not only has he been on a tear, but he's been on a tear with very high-level competition. He's recently won all 5 of his last 5 fights with very high-level competition that the division has to offer. In fact, the guy is on a 10-fight win streak. I don't think that gets talked about enough. 10-fight win streak in Dracus's favor. Most recent one was back in August of 2024, and his most recent loss, get this, the last time Dracus lost was October of 2018, guys. That's been a crazy long while, and every year he's faced better and better guys. Let's talk about the stylistic advantages that Dracus has here. First and foremost, he's an unorthodox striker. He employs this very awkward, unpredictable striking style, very difficult to read and defend against. Honestly, a lot of times Dracus looks gassed out, but the guy is not gassed out at all. Don't let those fights fool you. When you look back at his fighting footage like I did, he looks gassed out at times, but he's killing it. He's able to still throw a lot of volume, effective punches, and he lands. He's not sluggish. Now, what he does really well is he switches stances, and he just uses very unconventional angles as a striker. And not only that, but he has a good amount of power behind that too. And I think that's going to disrupt Strickland's more traditional boxing-like approach. I mean, if Strickland is good at something, it's his volume, it's his relentless pace. He just knows how to push forward and make you uncomfortable. But what do you do if your opponent is able to hit you at very awkward angles? And I think that's what really hurt Strickland in that first fight and made him struggle. He also has a grappling threat, Dracus, I mean. So Strickland, he's faced guys recently, but he hasn't faced a guy with a lot of grappling threat, I should say. Du Plessis, on the other hand, he presents a huge takedown threat. I mean, that's a pretty key part of his game, especially when you consider that most of his wins, or more of his wins I should say, came via submission than KO/TKO. It's almost even. It's 9 KO/TKOs and 11 submission victories, but still a lot of his wins come from that takedown, and that is just somewhere where Strickland, if this fight goes that way, which that first fight did not, but that's going to make Strickland a little bit hesitant when it comes to the striking exchanges. He's going to be a little bit more careful, and Dracus might be looking to exploit this advantage that he has that he didn't really explore much. Now, when it comes to adaptability, Du Plessis, he's shown in a lot of fights his ability to just make those mid-fight adjustments that are absolutely key and just overcome adversity when it comes to a dynamic of a fight. That is very important. He is an adaptable fighter, and especially when you talk about 5 rounds instead of 3, it's important to be dynamic as a fighter and just adaptable. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but he has a lot of power in his punches. Now, Strickland, he's known for his volume strikes. He doesn't necessarily hit you with the hardest shots. He does damage on you, but a lot of it is volume and pressure fighting, right? And Du Plessis, he, on the other hand, has a lot of knockout power, and sometimes that makes volume type of guys struggle a little bit or just hesitate, because you have someone with a deadly counter ability that's powerful as well. That's going to make Strickland just a bit more cautious when it comes to exchanges. He's not going to be careless or anything like that. Now, Du Plessis, he does have a very wide variety of strikes. I mean, he uses his kicks really well. He even uses his knees very well. And Strickland, he's kind of a more, he has one thing, and that's his boxing and his pressure. And that just doesn't cut it when it comes to very high level competitors in the division. Now, Strickland, I do think that there's a decent chance that he can pull off an upset. I mean, enough for me to say that he is a dangerous underdog, or a valuable underdog, I should say. But I still think Dracus Du Plessis logically has what it takes, where I can say he should get the victory here. He's also effective in the clinch, and in the clinch, he lands strikes, and he also works for takedowns, sometimes doing one or the other, and that is some versatility within the clinch that I think goes to his favor as well. All in all, I think he's going to be able to neutralize Strickland's that preferred striking range that Strickland keeps, and it's going to kind of force him in some uncomfortable positions. That first fight, it was very crucial, and let me just tell you guys what I really pulled from that first fight. When Strickland faced Adesanya, Strickland was pushing forward the entire time, making Adesanya very uncomfortable. It's almost like when Du Plessis fought Strickland, Du Plessis took notes from Strickland's game plan and he used them against Strickland. What I mean by that, Du Plessis, in that first fight with Sean Strickland, he was relentless with that forward pressure, which really threw Strickland off. he also had a very diverse attack. I mean, he used all sorts of attacks. He had kicks, knees. Strickland, on the other hand, in that first fight, again, like I said, he was only pretty much boxing. Now, when it came to the takedowns, Du Plessis, he had several takedowns in that fight, especially in that 4th round later on. And the judges, they probably really liked that. And so that's just important if you're able to score with the judges. A lot of people just focus on knockouts and stuff like that, but being able to get the judges to see that you are controlling the fight is very important as well. It's crucial. He was also adaptable in the fight. As the fight kind of progressed, Du Plessis, he made some key adjustments overall, such as like closing the distance, and that just helped him land a lot more effective strikes. Du Plessis, he also landed some very significant power shots in that fight, including that crazy uppercut in, I think it was the 3rd round, and it was also that right hand that really cut up Strickland in the 4th. Now, let me tell you some key things that I think Strickland did wrong in that first fight, and hopefully he learned from that, but a lot of it is in his nature as a fighter, and it's very hard to overcome some of that stuff. So first, his lack of volume in the later rounds. I mean, he started strong with his jab, but then his output significantly decreased in the later rounds. And that it kind of reversed things. It allowed Du Plessis to gain momentum in the fight. He also had a lot of defensive lapses. I mean, he had a very good defense early on because, you know, Strickland's guard is very interesting. He has that Philly shell stance, right? But his guard started getting penetrated a lot more frequently as the fight continued. Especially because of Du Plessis' looping punches, and I think that speaks to some of the adaptability on Du Plessis' end. Now, another thing, Strickland was struggling with that takedown defense, man. I mean, he was struggling to prevent Du Plessis from all of those takedowns, and that was very crucial. Like in the 4th round, that was extremely crucial, and he just failed to adjust overall. I mean, he didn't make the proper mid-fight adjustments to counter Du Plessis' increasing pressure in his diverse attacking style. And really, what he ended up doing was he let Du Plessis dictate the pace of the fight. And that is supposed to be Strickland's advantage. That's supposed to be his game plan. He let Du Plessis do that. And so he found himself on the back foot a lot more often, which just let Du Plessis be the stronger, better fighter in that first fight. So the fight was close. I'll say that. I'm not saying Du Plessis absolutely dominated. In fact, a lot of people said that Strickland did enough to retain his title. It was a close fight. I acknowledge that. I respect that. But all in all, everything I've seen from Du Plessis with that level of competition, I am going towards Du Plessis here, and I think he's going to get it done via decision. We're going to see an absolute war. It's going to be very fun. But bottom line, Du Plessis via decision is my verdict. Please let me know what you guys think. I would be more than happy to listen to y'all's insight and what you guys have to say about this fight. Thank you guys so much for watching this event's show and the predictions and the breakdowns. I will do a betting video later this week, so check that out if you want to know who are the most valuable underdogs, who are the most valuable favorites on this card, what are the best bets to consider, all of that stuff. And also, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe and like button. I break down fights. I give you guys all the research. I run the numbers. I crunch the numbers for you guys. So show some love. Help the algorithm grow. We're at 1.7K subscribers, 1,700 subscribers, thanks to you all. And hopefully we continue to grow. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And I hope you have a wonderful event. And with that, those are all of the fights for this weekend's event. I hope you all enjoyed the analysis and that your bets hit. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe as it'll help keep me motivated in creating these videos. Running this data, analysis, prediction models, and creating charts and graphs takes hours every day and week, so your support is always appreciated. Please also check out my Patreon if you'd like to support me through there. There's a $10 a month contribution option and a premium $20 a month option, which comes with early access to all of the analysis from this video, as well as promising underdogs, favorites, prop bets, and all of the extra data analysis and stats as well. This analysis, information, and these stats will help you with your bets, and it'll help support my efforts to continue providing and expanding content for you all. So please check out that Patreon if you want to show me some love and help me out there. Thank you all once again for watching, and as always, see you guys in the next one.